Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tansson Talks TV. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Mom.
We're so excited to have you all here today going into this episode. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to get into this. How are you doing today, Mom?
I'm doing just fine.
That is great to hear. So, are you able to go ahead and let us know what we'll be watching today? Pull up the nice bucket for us to choose.
Sure will. Bucket's right here. All right, let's see what comes out. Can you see? Today is the facts of life.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear about the facts of life and really get into today's episode.
Sounds great. Hold on, Brandon. I've got to find my notes from when we watched that episode.
Well, as you're finding the notes, I did want to go ahead and let you all know some information about today's discussion. So, while our focus is on the facts of life, and as you know, we have been doing first episodes, is that the Facts of Life is actually a spin off series of a different TV show, Diff'rent Strokes. And so, as such, even though we will be discussing the first episode of The Facts of Life, we'll also be discussing the backdoor pilot of the series. And so, for those of you watching, you may not know what that is, but in a previous episode, we discussed how a pilot episode is the episode that sells the show. It's usually a one and done show that overall gives you the general premise and what to expect from the series. As for a backdoor pilot, like The Facts of Life has, the episode is actually as a part of a previous show or currently existing show. And so in this case, The Facts of Life is a spin-off series for the Diff'rent Strokes character, Mrs. Garrett. But we'll dive into all of that very soon.
All right, sounds great.
And so, as always, that like we try to do, before we get into these discussions, we do like to let you all know, what do we know about the series before we dive right into it? And I can comfortably say that I've seen a good majority of The Facts of Life, maybe minus season one.
Yep. And Brandon, I can actually go along with that and say that I know every episode of The Facts of Life, along with season one. The group of episodes that you really haven't seen, I have seen them a few times.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the entire series numerous times over.
I have. I have.
But yeah, but like I said, we're going to dive right into this backdoor pilot episode first. And so this is an episode of Diff'rent Strokes titled The Girls' School.
It is. In this particular episode, kind of like Brandon mentioned, we really dive into some of the Diff'rent Strokes characters as they lead into the facts of life. And so we start with Kimberly Drummond is the daughter of Philip Drummond, and she attends boarding school. And the boarding school that she attends is Eastland School for Girls. And Kimberly kind of comes into the room and just mentions that she's in a play. Her family's interested, of course, of seeing her in that play. But the problem is that the head house mother, is what they're called, I guess, at that time period, of that particular dorm section, she quit. And so the house mother was actually the person who was going to help them with the costumes. And so Kimberly asked Mrs. Garrett to come to help with that, and Mrs. Garrett agrees. And this leads into really the whole scene for the Eastland School. Um, when the Kimberly enters with Mrs. Garrett, she sees there are an array of girls there. It's a school for girls, like you kind of mentioned, but there are a lot of girls in this particular episode, and so it seems like a little bit of a mad chaos as Mrs. Garrett enters the room. And so Mrs. Garrett, of course, does her best to try to, calm the girls down. Apparently, there's a new headmaster at the school. The headmaster is not necessarily liked by um, the girls and the old um, mother of that particular dorm. But anyway, the new headmaster's name is Mr. Crocker. And so during this particular episode, there are several girls that are introduced. In particular, just to name them because some of them do go on for other episodes. We have Nancy, Sue Ann, Blair, Molly, and Tootie, and Jennifer. And then, like I said, and also Kimberly in this episode. And so Nancy at some point in the episode, Nancy kind of discovers that her family does not have enough money to keep her in this particular school, and so that was one of the subplots of this particular episode, along with the costume design at the same time, and the girls kind of getting ready for the play. Um, there, it is discussed how Nancy can stay in the school itself, and Mr. Drummond kind of has a little bit of money, has a little bit of pool with some other people also. And so he kind of finds someone who could kind of help with the scholarship process for Nancy to stay in the school. So in this episode, what they've done is really kind of delve into Nancy, explain that how even though she attends the school, obviously her family does not have the money to keep her there. But yet Kimberly, of course, is able to stay there because she does have the money to, stay at this particular school. And then you see the lives very briefly of some of the other girls. In particular, Blair kind of stands out a little bit just because she seems to be the kind of wild card between the girls. And so, of course, at the end, Nancy does receive the scholarship to remain at the school.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the synopsis, as always.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, and so just a few things I just wanted to point out that I think that I observed with watching this is, first of all, as we mentioned, this is, the spinoff for the character Mrs. Garrett, who had thus far been in the show Diff'rent Strokes as their family's housekeeper. And so the family of Diff'rent Strokes are a very wealthy family, and so they make a note that Mrs. Garrett is an indispensable part of their day-to-day lives. And so having Mrs. Garrett gone, even just for this one episode, seems to throw them into complete chaos.
Mm-hmm. It does.
And I think it also in part shows like how big of a character Mrs. Garrett really is, and that she can handle her own show, played by Charlotte Rae, of course.
Yes, yes.
But something I would like to note is that we mentioned that in this pilot episode she is at the Eastland School for Girls. Is that printed everywhere? It actually says East Lake instead of Eastland.
Yeah, we both kind of caught that. It's kind of like they say one thing and that everything else is written as East Lake.
Yeah, and so I'm sure that was probably the original idea that they had conceived before making it officially Eastland later on. But nevertheless, is definitely very interesting to note.
It is. It is. And well, and what's also interesting is, I did watch Diff'rent Strokes, and we're not delving really into Diff'rent Strokes, but in watching it, I didn't realize quite how significant Mrs. Garrett was in this series. And I wouldn't have guessed she would be the one they would have done a pilot for. So it is kind of nice to see how they took this character and they just kind of delved and gave her own world in this other show.
Yeah, I would say that this episode really developed her quick character quite nicely. And yeah, but even going further into it, like I said, we meet some of the other girls, such as Tootie, and they note that she is always on roller skates, and quite young. Something that is both, true to the series, but something that they actually, like, verbally acknowledge within this pilot episode.
Yes, it is.
And so, for those who are listening to our discussion, but perhaps had not seen the show or the episode itself, so Tootie is one of the main students within the later series, and so throughout the entire first season, she is on roller skates, in part due to making her slightly taller, and so while I've always had figured that it was something that was just going to be never really playfully acknowledged. I mean, they flat out acknowledged it in this episode.
Yes, and Kim Phillips has later talked about that in different shows that she's been on, acknowledging how she was one of the younger people on that particular cast.
Yeah, and like we said, Nancy is the main, protagonist of this episode, we but even though we only see snapshots of her, the character of Blair is an easy antagonist like within this episode. This, like I said, truly despite her only appearing just in pieces in the beginning.
Yep, she does have a presence about her, so she did stand out as a character.
But is there anything else that you'd like to discuss before we go into our main object of discussion, the first full episode of Facts of Life?
No, I think I like the way it kind of leads one into the other. They both can stand alone, but at the same time, they both episodes I think were very needed in order to establish, the show itself.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. And even though we're not, going into a different strokes discussion right here, would you say that this episode would fit in, or do you think it's a very obvious, backdoor pilot episode?
Well, because we've watched so many TV shows, for us it's very obvious it's a backdoor pilot. But I think it fits into the show. I thought it fit into the show itself.
Yeah, I thought so too. But like I said, but the episode we just discussed was episode 24 of Diff'rent Strokes, the girls' school, ever known as Garrett's Girls of Diff'rent Strokes. But if you're ready, we are ready to go ahead and dive right into the Facts of Life, episode 1, Roughhousing.
All right, and this episode premiered in 1979. And on this particular episode, I will say for difference wise, one of the first thing I noticed was the girls, and the meaning that it's like someone has this, like the producers decided that we need to streamline this and just kind of just concentrate on a few girls rather than having the 25 girls. It seemed like they were in the Diff'rent Strokes episode. So it streamlined a little bit. It streamlines more later in the series, but at this point in time, they're streamlined to Mrs. Garrett, Blair, Tootie, Natalie, who was not in the other first episode. She is in this one now. Cindy, Nancy, Sue Ann, Molly. And so it's streamlined to that particular group of girls. And this particular episode actually focuses on Cindy. It is really about the harvest fair. Mrs. Garrett does come in along with Mr. Drummond and Arnold and Willis and Kimberly in this particular episode from Diff'rent Strokes. So they do kind of carry over to this because at this point in time, what they've established is that Mrs. Garrett is there, but it's supposed to be just a temporary assignment. She said she was going to stay there until they found someone to replace her at Eastland. Uh, but overall, it is the Harvest Festival, and Cindy has actually been nominated to be the Harvest Queen. And so it's really about this episode's about Cindy and whether or not she believes she could be the Harvest Queen. And she kind of disagrees a little bit. And Blair thinks that she is the perfect person to be the Harvest Queen because she has won in previous years. And she's not upset that Cindy's going to be has been nominated. She just doesn't think that Cindy will be the Harvest Queen. And so and so, in essence, it really is just about that, the particular Harvest Queen. The We are reintroduced to the headmaster. The headmaster has changed once more. Now we have a Mr. Bradley who is the headmaster, and then we also have a teacher, Miss Mahoney, that is in the episode also. Um, let's see. We do find out later that Cindy does not win the Harvest Queen Festival. Blair does actually win the festival again. And so it just kind of shows them both getting along. I don't know if this episode was just a way to kind of soften Blair a little bit, and in regards to letting her to show that yes, she can still be queen, but as she can still be nice toward the end anyway, with it. And then to kind of quickly delve into a little bit of the other girls, although not a lot of depth in there, but it does delve into to the girls to kind of show their relationship and who's really friends with who and things like that.
Yeah, well, as always, thank you so much for the great synopsis.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and so, yeah, like you said, the episode definitely starts off with their connection to Diff'rent Strokes. And as I'm sure I mentioned somewhere, is that I feel like for almost every spin-off show, the first episode is always going to have some type of connection to, to the original series, and so we see the cast of the other show coming back, special guest stars, and I mean, and even have a mention in the theme song.
Yes, they are. They are in the theme song for the first episode.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the theme song in just a moment because I know that's your specialty. But
Hmm.
continuing on with this episode, I mean, we really do get to explore Cindy, like you said, as opposed to Nancy that we explored in the previous episode. But something I find interesting is that between both episodes, even though this one had more of a focus on her, is how much Blair's character truly stands out. And maybe it's that they saw the first episode and figured, she needs to be head on head with someone, for the series to work.
Yeah, and I think they kind of, she seems to be the lead girl in the particular series.
Yeah, definitely. Even early on as this first episode here. And so it's so interesting to see everyone dive into everything and Mrs. Garrett still continuing to insist that her job at the Eastland School for Girls is only temporary and that she'll be back in the Drummond's household, back on Diff'rent Strokes, and just momentarily, even though, she never really does, per se.
No, she never comes back. In future episodes, there's a little bit of crossover both ways with whether or not, maybe not the main characters, but there are still some crossovers, and then it just kind of stops at some point.
Yeah, and something I'd like to note too is that even though this is established as of course Mrs. Garrett's show, but that the only reason she's there is because the character of Kimberly from Diff'rent Strokes goes to the school, but yet she's barely seen in this episode at all.
Yes. Well, and they kind of established that I think Kimberly, even though attending this school, I don't think she lives in the dorms. I think she still lives at home.
Yeah, but even then, like she doesn't partake in in the school activities, and they have this whole harvest fair, and she seems like an outsider to this whole thing. Like, did she switch schools in between the two episodes?
I know it seems like she does, but yeah, she is just truly the outside character, just the initial link to put them together. But then once there, Kimberly's kind of taken out of the mix. I guess it's done purposely so the girls can stand out, and so they don't need Kimberly to actually make the show work.
Yeah, and but it definitely shows a good foil to to the other show, and I would say too is that like you said, Blair's character is really sort of better developed in this episode, and showing yes she has a soft side. She's not as you know intensely dramatic as she was in the previous one, but I would say this episode also sort of starts up a dynamic of a at least from what it feels like to me, like we're going to focus on maybe a pairing like per episode. I haven't seen the rest of season one, but I presume that's where it's going based off this episode.
Well, typically for the rest of the episodes, it seems like all the girls got at least one episode. So as a way to kind of delve into each of the characters and to get to know them and to know a little bit about their background at the same time.
Okay, that is definitely good to know, and like we said earlier, like we do see the subtle changes between the backdoor pilot in this first episode, like Mr. Crocker, the headmaster, being exchanged out for for Mr. Bradley. Any thoughts about that?
Actually, to me, they seem like the same character. So it was just a different actor playing, the main. So there's got to be a head somewhere, and I think the head kind of changes again at some point in time period in the show, and so it was just that character that needs to be there to show that there is someone who kind of owns the school anyway.
Definitely, but I would say that for both episodes, but especially the backdoor pilot, that there's just a lot of girls, like that are shown throughout that backdoor pilot, and still a lot in this one, but it's definitely an overwhelming amount.
It is, and then Brandon, I know at a later time we might discuss some other episodes of the Facts of Life, and we can kind of see how it's streamlined even further.
Definitely, yeah. I've always enjoyed this series, and so it was kind of fun being able to go back and see these episodes before the ones I've seen. So
Yes,
yeah.
it was going back nice watching the first episode again and just kind of seeing how it all started once more.
Absolutely. And so, is there anything else that you'd like to mention about viewing through this, and or any comparisons between the two episodes, or anything else for that matter?
Well, I honestly, the Different Strokes episode, I really did not remember. I remember bits and pieces, but I really did not remember the episode at all. So that was fun watching that episode, just to kind of go back and to see how the show really started. It's kind of like I knew Mrs. Garrett went over, but didn't remember the details of that particular episode.
Definitely. And I would say that even though Mrs. Garrett herself isn't even featured that much within, this first episode of The Facts of Life, I mean, though she is the starring character, like, she sort of took a back seat to the girls in this, which I found so interesting.
Yeah, they kind of. I think it's just because they wanted the show truly to be about the girls and to have someone who could kind of lead them in the correct direct. Well, in a better direction. Let's put it that way.
Definitely. But since we mentioned the theme song, what are your thoughts about the theme song for this first episode of The Facts of Life?
Well, I absolutely love the theme song to The Facts of Life. So for me, it's a 10 because I can sing probably every version that there is. So yes, I do. I really like the Facts of Life theme song.
And out of curiosity, again, I know you've seen the whole first season, but yeah, upon rewatching, because it's been at least several years since you've seen, season one, is that did you remember all the girls' names and personalities like upon rewatch?
I did not remember. Well, I remember all the girls. The personalities is something else. So I vaguely remembered their personalities.
Yeah, I know for me, like, and even taking my notes over here is, trying to remember which one's which is, something that I liked about these two episodes is that they at least focused on, different characters. And so I just, find it so interesting how later in the series, how they continue to develop and streamline it more, like you said. And so, yeah, I'm sure that we'll be touching on this at some point or another.
No, that sounds great. I can't wait to talk about other episodes of the series.
Yeah, definitely. And so, yeah, I guess that overall, concludes our discussion unless you have anything else to say.
No, at this point, I don't.
All right, well, that sounds great. And of course, yeah, as always, we always want you all to watch these shows with us and let us know your thoughts about these shows in the comments, because we love to see your thoughts and add on to our discussion.
And then, Brandon, we got excited because we actually had someone comment, and we had someone who actually gave us some suggestions for shows. So they'll make it in the box, and we'll see when we pick those out.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to explore those free shows because yeah, I haven't seen any of them, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, same here.
But yeah, but until next time, have a wonderful day, everyone, and I can't wait until our next week discussion.
All right, same here, Brandon.
All right, take care. We'll see y'all later.
All right, bye bye.